This is a model I've been really looking forward to painting, the Bladeguard Veterans, and I'm going to be painting them, of course, as Blood Angels Bladeguard Veterans. Now, the place to start is, of course, as always, with the armour. And the colour we're going to be using is Blood Angels Red. Now, when we use our, when we're painting power armour, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we've got a good consistency of paint on the brush, but not so that it looks like it's got a drip at the end, because that's too much. And what we want to do is we want to make contact with the model by the recesses, and we want to just pull the paint around in these big broad brush strokes like this, just watching for any pools. As we go. You always want to kind of go in the same direction. So like left to right or up and down. We really want to cross the streams, as it were. Make sure we get right in there. As you can see, I'm also just trying to always just use the tip of my brush rather than the whole brush. And we're always just taking it an armour panel at a time. And once all that Blood Angels Red is dry, we've now got this lovely base coat established. So before we do any of the highlights on the armour, we're actually just going to complete the rest of the details and then do all the highlights at once. So the first detail that we're going to work on, considering this, is the robe. And for the Blood Angels, this is going to be black. Now, the colour we're going to use for this is Ultramarines Blue, which doesn't make any sense, I know, but there's a method to the madness. So the Ultramarines Blue acts as our pre-shade for the robe. And so what we want to do is we just want to colour this Ultramarines Blue all over the robe up here, like so. And then on the bottom robe, effectively what we want to do is we want to draw a line that goes along the bottom of the robe like this, trying to be as straight as we can. Just like that. And then what we want to do is block in all of the robe above that with this Ultramarines Blue. And next up for the rose, we want to take some black Templar, and we want to apply this all over the robe. But what we want to try and do is just leave some of that Ultramarines Blue showing through on the sharpest areas of the robe. So like you can see here, we've got these kind of areas where the blue, where it kind of bunches up around his belt. You got that little edge there. And over here as well. Similarly on the large part of the robe, what we want to do is we're going to add this black Templar like this. Just leaving that Ultramarines Blue shining through on the edge. And coming right up to where we left that line. Like that. You can see what this does is it gives us this really lovely sharp highlight on the robe, which is a great place for our starting point for when we're highlighting all these robes. And once that black Templar is dried, just before we highlight it, we want to take some Skeleton Horde, and we want to use this around where we've left that gap at the bottom. So you just want a nice soft cream here. So we don't want to use very much. And we're using Skeleton Horde because Skeleton Horde, if you get a little bit on the black, it's not the end of the world. It will not show up. Like that. What we can also do, just to save some time, is use this Skeleton Horde here on the parchment of the purity seal. Like that. Just want to continue around on the back doing this. And once all that is dry, we want to use a small amount of Fenrisian Grey just to apply some highlights to this black robe. So we just want to pick out the hardest, sharpest points of the robe. Like this. And similarly, we want to use a small amount of Wraithbone to apply the highlights to that skeleton horde area. This is to effectively match that intensity of the Fenrisian Grey highlight. Like that. Similarly, do the same thing. On the purity seal. And with that, the robes are done for now, because we can do some freehand on them, but that's totally optional. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to focus on the rest of the black details. And so this includes things like the Aquila, the soft details on his armor, and this skull on his short knee pad, and the inside of the shield. So for this, we're going to use some black Templar, and all we want to do is take a fair dollop of it on our brush, and then just start painting this all over these areas, like this. Just being careful when we get close to that red armor. And next up, once all that black Templar is dry, what we're going to do is going to paint in all the leather details. And so typically with the Blood Angel, you would see the leather pouches and stuff be a sort of black leather, but because we've got the black rose, we don't want to do a black belt, a black pouch on top of a black robes. So you could just get lost. So actually the color that we're going to use for these leather details is Cygor Brown. Because it's just different enough in tone, whilst also giving us this really lovely, rich, dark leather sort of colour. We want to use this all over the pouches, the belt, and that's it. That's all the leather details. You know. And with all that Cygor Brown applied, we're now going to move on and we're going to paint in all the gold details. And there is a lot of them. So the gold details include areas like the banding on the shield. So like around here and along the front, and of course along the back as well. So we want to get this gold on there. This is Retributor Gold, I don't think I've said that. We also want to paint the kind of outline of the cross, but leaving the skulls gold, like this. But we also want to paint in his helmet, the trim on his shoulder pads, the iron halo, the hilt on his sword, the relief here, the bits on his knees. Yeah, there's a lot of gold details. So yeah, we want to just go around and pick out all of these bits that we want to be gold with the Retributor Armour. And next up, we want to use some thinned down Iron Warriors for all the silver details. So this is areas like the sword blade, and also the holster, the heavy bolt pistol, his buckle, the skulls on the shield, and the vents on his backpack. And next up, with all that silver applied, we're going to use some Magos Purple. And this is just for the little wax seal on the purity seal down here. As well as for his sword grip. And next up, with that Magos Purple applied, we're going to colour in the front of the shield, and the colour we're going to use for this is Apothecary White. And what we want to do is we just want to be really careful that we don't get this on that gold, but if we do, we can always neaten it up. We want this Apothecary White layer to be quite smooth, so you don't want to use loads at once. And with all of that dry, we're now going to shade all those metallics. So the colour we're going to be using for this is Basilicanum Grey. We just want to put this all over the gold and all over the silver. Like this. And with that Basilicanum Grey applied, as you can see, the model's taken a massive leap forward and is now looking, well, he's looking pretty awesome. So before we do any of those metallic highlights, we are just going to colour in the last part that we've not done any contrast for. And this is his tilting shield. And really you could do any design here, but what we're going to do is we're going to do it in halves. And we're going to do one half red and one half yellow. And so what we want to do is we want to take some Blood Angels red on our brush. We want to draw a line going right down the middle of the shield, like that. And then what we want to do is we want to block in one half of the shield. I'm going to block in the right hand side, his left hand side, my right hand side, like this. And then next up, I'm going to do the exact same thing again, but using some Iyanden Yellow. Turn him upside down for this. It's a little too much. And once that Iyanden Yellow is dry, I'm going to use some thinned down Corax White. And this is to draw in a couple of things. So what I want to do is on this side, I want to draw in a teardrop. So I'm just going to use my freehand skills to colour in the outline of the teardrop on one side. On the yellow side, like that. And use the same Corax White just to colour that in. like that. Then I'm going to give the brush a quick wash. And then I'm going to use the Corax White. Just to do a little bit of script writing on the red hand side. And this is basically done by just drawing out these shaky little lines. Like that. I'm just going to continue all the way down the shield. You can also use this as an opportunity to use your Corax White to highlight the white part of the shield. We can just do this by picking out the rivets. And with those white freehand and the white highlights applied to the shield, we're now ready to do the last base coat before we go on a great big highlighting journey. And the colour that we're going to use is Ork Flesh. And this is just for his eyes and for any little exposed cables that you can see on any of these Bladeguard veterans. So on this gentleman, there's one just here on his arm. And as promised, it's now time to do some highlights. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the metallics, and in particular with the gold. And for this, we're going to be using some thinned down Liberator Gold. And all we want to do is we just want to pick out all of the edges of the gold details that we've already coloured in. Just like this. And with that Liberator Gold highlight applied to all that Retributor Armour, we're now going to use some thinned down Iron Hand Steel. And this is to highlight all of the silver details. So we want to pick out areas like the power node on the sword and the cable. Don't want to get all of the cable, we just want to do like the top 2/3 like that. And we also want to pick out the edge of the blade, like this. We also, if you're feeling brave, do the central ridge line of the blade. And next up, we're going to highlight all of those brown details using some Mournfang Brown. This just gives us that kind of warm leather look that we're after. And with that Mournfang Brown applied, the highlight's really subtle, but it just kind of makes that leather all just pop nicely. So next up, we're going to use a Moot Green. And this is just to highlight his eyes. You just want to draw a little line going across the center of the lens, like that. And so next up, what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all of the red armor. And for this, we're going to be using some thinned down Fire Dragon Bright. Now, it's always a good idea with this bit just to use a little bit more water than you would normally. So you get lots of control and it flows very easily. But also, it just kind of merges with the Blood Angel's Red a little bit better the more watery that the Fire Dragon Bright is. So I generally use kind of like 2 or 3 parts water at this point, rather than just the standard 1. And all we want to do is we just want to pick out the sharpest areas with this colour. So you don't want to do every single edge, because he'll look kind of like he's going to a rave. You just want to pick out those areas that just kind of pop a little bit, just to give the impression of the light catching. And next up, what we want to do is we want to do a little dot of Corax White just in the top right corner of the lens. And similarly on the other side, in the top left, like that. And with that, your Bladeguard Veteran is now complete. However, if you want to do this totally optional stage because you're feeling very brave, then follow along. So what we want to do is on that gap that we drew at the bottom of the cloak, we want to do a couple of little teeny tiny red blood drops just in the corners of the cloak. So we take our Blood Angel's Red, very small amount, and just using the tip of our brush, we just want to draw a very small little teardrop. Like this. And with that, the Bladeguard Veteran is now complete, and all that's left to do is his base. Now, to see an in-depth guide about how I do this, you can find my YouTube video of how to paint nuclear wasteland bases, because I'm not going to do it again. But the first colour is astrogranite debris. But yeah, if you want to check out how I complete this base, check out that video now. Otherwise, do it in the same scheme as the rest of your army, or indeed the rest of your Indomitus set. And then you're done. Well, there's really not very much to say other than, well, I absolutely love it. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me further like these legends on the screen, you can do so. Head to patreon.com/warhipster or head to ko-fi.com/warhipster. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Do all of that good stuff. And if you want to be kept up to date, make sure to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.